Testy.
The bottom. Do the introduction. Do you want I know, I think we might just have to deal with one. I think the battery's gone on that.
Yeah, this is the real life version of you're on mute. There we go. So hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Block, and hello to everybody watching at home. We have a live studio audience, which I'm absolutely thrilled about. Post-pandemic events still have tech failures, but at least we get a lovely bunch of people to cheer us on along the way. So I'm delighted to welcome you here today to one of our newest developments, Block, in Manchester City Centre. I would absolutely urge you to go and have a little look around afterwards as well. Downstairs we've got yoga studios, we've got all sorts. It's a really beautiful space, and some of you might be thinking, why are Bruntwood Works, a property developer that creates these spaces, why are you talking about Fintech today? Which would be a completely fair question. So at the start of the pandemic last year, we launched a business support program called Spark. So we are very fortunate to work with about 3,000 customers within our portfolio who all do really incredible things. And for us, it's not just about creating beautiful buildings, it's filling them with exciting people and getting those conversations and getting them all talking to each other, finding out what's making them tick and what they're excited about too. So we started online, as you can imagine, with webinars, workshops, advisory sessions, all sorts of things. And now we're thrilled to be rolling those out in person as well. And so if you enjoy today, I would recommend go to www.bruntwood.co.uk/spark. I always feel like a Blue Peter presenter, you know, when they're like, go online to enter this competition or something. We've got absolutely tons on, everything from organisational development right through to personal development. The Future series, which is what we're here for today, is a really exciting opportunity for us to pull together a panel of experts from our partners, from customers, from business friends, to say what's going on in your landscape at the moment, and, you know, let's take a big look into the horizon of the future of your industry, where it's going, where we should be excited about, what, you know, which horses we should be backing. So I'd like to introduce our panel to our audience and to our audience at home. I'm going to pass the mic around. This is going to be like a physical talkie stick today, I think, to say who you are, where you're from, and maybe a bit of context as to what you do in your organisation as well, kind of what background you're coming with.
Cool, thank you. So I'm Cam, one of the directors and shareholders of a business called Total Processing. We are a payments business. We specialise in helping businesses transact online, so fast fashion brands, as an example, through to the education space. We started the business 3 years ago, and at that time we've gone from 0 people to just over 60. We've got offices in Manchester, Dubai and Germany. And sort of where we differentiate to our competitors, that we're very customer focused, so we help businesses that can't be serviced by the big giants in our space. So anyone who needs some kind of bespoke features, that's where we come in. My role in the business is to head up strategy and corporate development. So if we're opening new offices, targeting new verticals, or developing out the product, that's what I look after.
Morning, everybody. My name's Angela Yor. I'm one of the co-founders and managing directors of Skyparlour. We're a PR consulting firm, but we focus in on fintech. So I couldn't be happier here today to talk about fintech, my most favourite subject, other than being an Uber driver for my son. So just in terms of my role on a day-to-day basis, so, you know, we have offices in Alderley Edge, Bruntwood offices, in fact. Manchester, London, and we're looking to expand into the US as well. We have people out there helping us at the minute, employees. We've grown. We're a real Manchester success story as a business, and we've grown, quite substantially in recent years. Because our sector is thriving, and we're thriving as a result of the sector thriving, and as a result of the sector needing to really think about how it communicates to get those messages, like you said, about how different, why businesses are different. We really help people tell that story. So lovely to meet you all, and thanks for coming today.
Thanks, Angela. Nick Reed from Bankify. So Bankify is a company that basically provides technology to banks, which makes business financial management easier for small and medium-sized enterprises. So we could never quite understand why, when you're talking SME financial management, an SME would have a bank account on one side and then accounting software here, and the two were very separate. So we've approached this from the bank's perspective, and we're bringing in those types of financial management functionalities and workflows that SMEs really value to make them available from within a bank's channel. My role specifically within Bankify, I joined earlier this year actually, so not long with the business, but I work on our sales and partnerships initiatives with our banks and financial institution partners. But prior to that, I was a decade with a company that provided technology to banks and FIs in commercial cards and virtual cards specifically. So a decade plus providing technology to banks. Wonderful to be here today, and really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Nick. My name is Niels Pedersen. I'm a senior lecturer at the Manchester Metropolitan University, and I teach on the Fintech program there, which is a postgraduate degree. It is now entering its 4th year, and during the last year or so, I've published a book on Fintech, which is very originally named Financial Technology. So yeah, that's me. And it's really good to see all of you here today in person.
I'm going to dash back up here while I'm waiting on the microphone. So this is quite handy actually, because I'm going to come back and send the microphone this way. You've all mentioned that you are very Manchester, very northern centric. Angela was mentioning before she's moved up from London recently, so it's lovely to have bagged you up here. Why is Manchester such a hotspot for fintech innovation? I mean, MMU was the first course to, specialise in fintech. We've got people in industry absolutely booming, loads to talk about. Why here and why now?
Well, that's a really good question. I think, as we can see on this panel, that there's a real diversity of different people. We have entrepreneurs, we have evangelists, and I don't know how you describe yourself, Nick.
General dog's body.
Okay. And obviously we have academic institutions. In fact, multiple. So I'm representing MMU today. I have a colleague here from the Uni of, yes. And I think in our audience, I'm sure we have people from many walks of life. So I think Manchester is a great place for bringing people together. And obviously the amenities are good. I think its size works well. So it's, a big city, but not too big. So you can quite easily connect with people. And yeah, that would be my 2 cents.
Thanks, Niels. So I think when I look at the reasons why this is such a hotspot for fintech at the moment, I think there's a couple of things I'd probably call out. There's devolution is a politically loaded word, which I'm going to steer well clear of. But I think undoubtedly there has been a decentralisation in terms of the concentration of fintech away from London, and that's not just here in Manchester in the northwest. I'd call out other areas such as Edinburgh as well. So I think that's definitely been a contributing factor. I think we have a captive audience here in Manchester in terms of end users of fintech, consumers and businesses, really digitally and tech savvy. And I think that's, having a captive audience is key to that as well. And that's engendered by other technology, not just within fintech as well. So that's another factor that I'd definitely call out. The other one is I think there's never been a better time in terms of access to startup and growth capital for fintechs. You can't go a day now without seeing various fundraisers, etc., by companies within this space. And there are some fantastic companies within the Northwest who are investing in fintech at the moment as well. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
I think that Manchester is doing incredibly well as a city for fintech. I still think there's room for improvement in terms of the fact that, I work with companies on all four corners of the globe, and there's maybe, Manchester's doing well, but if you compare it to Singapore or other cities, I think we could really grasp the opportunity, so we shouldn't be complacent about that. I also think that we have great infrastructure with our airports. The Manchester Airport just is expanding at the minute. There's the political will behind levelling up, which we needed as we've got great knowledge workers around the Northwest. We've got people that are being priced out of living in other major metropolitan cities globally that can have an amazing life in around and about in Manchester. I live in Wilmslow, which is 20 miles outside the city, and it's absolutely gorgeous, but compared to the sort of property you can buy in and around London, I have an amazing life, brilliant schools, less people using the hospitals, that the NHS in some of the bigger cities is just completely crowded. So there's many good reasons why I think people are beginning to wake up to Manchester, but we want to level up across the country. Mm-hmm. We want to level up in the Northwest. We want to see jobs. The Findexable Index has also put Newcastle up there as a city that's thriving for fintech. And, would like to see that redistribution of great jobs. And also, not just in Manchester, but, our sector has the opportunity to socially, is a socially mobile sector. It can change lives. Look at Africa with M-Pesa and some of the developing countries that are now starting to be entrepreneurial in the space. It's such a fantastic, good sector to be in, to make a difference to communities throughout the world.
That was a fabulous poster for the North. Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you, Angela.
Thanks, Angela. I also agree with you. I think if you compare Manchester to London, London is still by far the fintech capital of Europe. And so we've still got a long way to go in Manchester. But coming at it from an entrepreneurship angle, I think running a business in Manchester is far easier from a talent perspective. You're competing, with local businesses rather than if you're in London, you've got huge multinational businesses that are constantly trying to poach staff. I think Manchester has a good sense of loyalty as well. Mm-hmm. So if you provide a great working environment and culture for your business, you're able to retain and keep people a lot easier than you would say in London. And also from a pay point as well. Yeah. It's far cheaper and easier, I guess, to scale a business based in Manchester rather than London.
I mean, you guys have got massive growth potential, haven't you? You've been completely accelerating things, which is lovely to see.
Yeah, and I think we have no intention to move away from Manchester. There's still plenty of people with the skills we need to grow the business here. And what we're building is, a very tight-knit team who are all collaborative, who all want to be in Manchester and build it from here.
That's amazing. And I think as well, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit earlier than expected, because that point around team and around skills is something I'm really keen to pull out. Obviously, we've got such fantastic infrastructure with the universities, with industry here, and the way that all comes together. When businesses are looking to hire the next kind of the next rising stars of fintech, what sorts of roles are you going to be looking for, and what sorts of backgrounds do you think they'll be coming from? I'm going to start with you and we'll go back that way.
Sure. So I think our two largest teams are development and sales. Okay. So from a development point, it's finding people who are technically able, mm-hmm. and that starts at the junior level, and we're happy to help people build that domain knowledge. Yep. But it's also finding people with some domain expertise. And that is probably that's significantly harder than finding the junior people.
Yeah.
But the universities have great people who come out of there. There are actually a lot of other fintech businesses who can cross-sell or cross-share knowledge. which
Brilliant.
is good.
So there's quite a lot of partnerships.
Yeah, and I think Manchester is, as a region, is more open to those partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
It's far less competitive, and people are willing to help each other out. Nick, Bankify, we've spoken to each other and the wider team. Adian, a great partner of ours as well.
Brilliant.
And then I think from a sales point of view, what we're doing is B2B SaaS essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of businesses who've been very successful at that in the region.
Yeah.
And so it's actually quite easy to find great people.
That's brilliant. Pass it back that way.
Well, I want to call out you guys because, and the guys from Elevate as well, because I think we need more debates like this, more, of the fintech industry collaborating, connecting, becoming influential, but also learning together. So, and I think that that's a way of, from the ground up, improving the skills in the area. But again, I'm not going to sort of just put the positive spin on this. It isn't easy, to get. At the minute, there's a national shortage of good skills, across many sectors, and fintech is one of those. So, a friend of mine has just started an initiative called Rubik's that you might be interested in, actually, and it's like an apprenticeship scheme for developers. Who have come out of university with good degrees, but don't necessarily have, the well-rounded skills outside of developing, and coding. So to make coders and developers also good business people and good communicators, because I think there's more to being a developer than actually just sitting in front of a screen. And people from all walks of life, diversities, go on this scheme and get the skills that other people might get from their families or from their schooling, but they've got the brains, but they literally haven't had those opportunities. So there's things like that we should look at. Also, what the degrees, in fintech and the MSCs and things like that, we should encourage our teams to look at, being hot on the button, keeping up with the news, understanding what the future of the sector is going to look at, not just looking at what we're doing today, but what should we be doing tomorrow.
Yeah. No, you're totally right, Angela. Thank you. And what are you seeing from a kind of hiring within the industry perspective? What skills are you looking for, Nick?
I think I'd agree with a lot of what both Cam and Angela have said there. If I could pick up on something that Cam said initially, I think definitely, well, I work in sales, so I would say sales. But if I could detach myself from that element, on the development side, and I think to go a level deeper, you look at that in two separate from two separate lenses, if you like. Mm-hmm. First one would be front end and back end as well. And
okay.
So obviously front end all around creating a slick user experience from a consumer and a business perspective.
Yeah.
But then just as crucially back end, obviously fintech is all around APIs, etc. So that the guys who are working on, I've heard several different analogies to refer to this. A rugby one, you've got the forwards who score the tries and take all the glory. That's your front end user experience. But then the backs who work hard to create that and almost are the unsung heroes, if you like. So there's definitely the front and back end from a development perspective. I think the other thing that I'd call out is that in our experience of providing technology to banks who then go on and ultimately our technology, the beneficiary is the end user, but we provide it through the bank.
Yeah.
If the banks don't market and advertise the availability of the technology to the end user, whether that's a consumer or a business, and create awareness around it, it's almost pointless producing it. So yeah, definitely sales, definitely development, and I'd throw in marketing, promoting around that as well.
Brilliant. And Niels, you're obviously creating a talent pipeline, but also upskilling people from the sector. Is it TLT solicitors that you've been working with their legal team, getting them up to speed with fintech?
Well, I've done some training with them.
Amazing.
On a couple of occasions, and some other firms as well. Yes, we've done some with you as well. I think all of you said really good things, so I'm at a loss if I can add.
It's always
anything.
hard to be the one at the end.
I know. What I would add though is I think I think all of you said good things. So I apologize if I point to the wrong person and Maybe you didn't say it, but I want to pick up on something Angela alluded to, and I think it was this idea that upskilling and learning needs to be continuous, because the world is changing. And so what I would say to anyone who is a professional, whether it's an accounting professional or a legal professional or indeed a medical professional, is that it's good to have your expertise in whatever field you're in. But you don't necessarily need to learn to code. But it's good to have a progressively deeper and deeper understanding of what and how the technology is and how it works. You and I, we were just talking about APIs and microservices, and I don't know if I succeeded, but I was attempting to understand how they work in a very plain English way, and I think that's incumbent on all of us. Can we?
Yeah, can you articulate a complex?
Yeah, so if we're not, we all have our skills and our inclinations and our talents, but can we get our head around the technology in plain English?
Yeah.
And not to be too shameless regarding my book, but that's what I tried. When I wrote it, I tried to put things in plain English.
Amazing. Right. Well, what I'm going to do is as follow up to everybody here and to everybody watching at home. I'll pop a link on because I think that would be good extracurricular reading, definitely.
All right.
I think something that ties in with what Neil said there and then links back to something both Angela and Cam said is one really undertapped or undervalued skill is kind of that liaison between the technical and sales side as well. So the ability, to your point, to articulate the value prop of what's being provided. But say I'm going to overgeneralize here for the sake of what I'm going to say, but you could see sales as the blunt instrument. You could see the techies that are doing the clever stuff in the background. But then you need somebody in between who is both articulating internally how it works and also externally and making it simple as well.
Yeah.
Niels and I were chatting beforehand offline. Still used to being in the Zoom mode. But are we going to talk on sort of remote working later as well and how that's impacting?
Bring that up now.
Right,
yeah,
okay.
That's great.
We were saying before, from a technical perspective, there's kind of never been a better time to be a developer or whatever aspect of development it is.
Yeah.
One of the undoubted trends coming out of the pandemic is obviously remote working. And I just think that it's creating this environment where developers in particular can, they've got the flexibility in terms of their working conditions, etc. And I look at the banks, as we do from our lens in terms of providing tech to them. It's really fascinating to watch what's happening on Wall Street right now, where Jane Fraser at Citi is, they've been very public about the fact that they will have a remote working policy. And it's almost a talent or a recruitment tool, if you like. And this is against the backdrop of the CEOs of JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs being almost right at the opposite end of the spectrum and saying that, I think it was the Goldman CEO who said remote working was an aberration that will be corrected. So it's the bank,
that new balance.
Yeah, and the banks are recognising that as well, definitely. Or the sector in general is recognising that, definitely.
And I think there used to be quite a lot of security implications as to why remote working as well was kind of banned. And as we've had to work from home a lot more, we've had to come around with new solutions in that. And that might be a little bit of a segue into a topic around regulation, because I know that when we were speaking ahead of the event, when I was trying to swat up on fintech and what was going on with you all, that was quite a kind of a battle that a lot of you saw within the sector in terms of tech and how it's being created and the regulation that needs to sit behind the financial market. And how the two interacted, the fact that tech is obviously accelerating quite quickly. Sometimes regulation might be holding it back. And Cam, you mentioned a really interesting point about the fact that a lot of the stuff that's being developed is by people that don't have that regulatory background. So how do you see that panning out? Can I pass it over to you?
Sure. So I think this is always going to be the case with disruptive businesses. So, the technology is always going to move quicker than the regulation or the market. And it's finding that communication layer, as you do with sales and technology. There needs to be that communication layer between the regulator and the technology provider. And so it comes at two angles. If you create something disruptive, how do you convince the regulator that the customers are safe? And so we as a business are going along this regulatory journey, and we've had to hire people with that experience in order to communicate effectively to those people. But equally, it's making sure that when things are developed, the teams who are behind it understand the frameworks, and at the heart of that, it's making sure that customers are protected, because that's what essentially the regulator's doing. So it comes in twofold. You've got the product development side where it needs to be done in the correct way, but even if you're developing stuff in the correct way, how do you effectively communicate so you maintain that pace of disruption and communicate it with the regulators? And that is a difficult thing to do.
That's brilliant. Angela, sorry.
I don't know where to go for the microphone first. So on that, again, I think it all comes back down to, without stating the obvious, but it does come down to really good communication links with the regulator. And, there's now hundreds of fintechs worldwide, and there's quite a lot of regulators as well, in each country. And I don't think that, there's only so much you can do as one company. I think where we've seen the ability to be able to really make influence on the regulator is, I can give my experiences, is that I'm on the advisory board of the Emerging Payments Association. It represents 160 fintechs around the world, most of which are in the UK. But it's through having a voice. So the advisory board and the director general, represent the voice of those 160 members, and we actually were quite influential in when the Wirecard scandal, happened. The FCA suspended the transactions for 18 million users in the UK over payday and weekends, and there was people that were left in vulnerable positions, and we heavily lobbied, via public relations through my company supporting with that. We heavily lobbied the regulator, the FCA, at that point, and that lift the suspension. Once the FCA knew that it was safe to do so, they did lift the suspension. And, we've got the customer duty consultation that's just gone out by the FCA as well. It's quite strict. It's going to put a lot of extra costs and layers for the different vendors and technology providers. And there's got to be that balance between disruption versus the safety of the consumer. So we've lobbied them again to say, we think you've gone a little bit too far here. We're not going to be able to do what you're asking. So, I think that, the regulators are not technologists always, so they need to understand, the different terms, the different, practicalities of what they're coming out with, and that's, I guess, why they have these consultations, so that we can all respond to them, get involved, respond, see, and maybe join some of the organisations that can represent your voice as well, so you have a stronger voice.
I think just to the way we look at regulation and the impact it's had on the industry is very much in the context of PSD2 and open banking. So that's and we're lucky here in this country and in Europe in general, because we've gone about this in a open finance and open banking in a regulated way. And it is fascinating to see how the principles of PSD2 were to foster innovation, create more protection and choice and competition. I think there's lots that we could go down a rabbit warren here and argue all sorts of what's been good and what's been bad. But I think the one positive we're seeing from this, one of many positives we're seeing from it, a regulated approach, is that it's forcing the incumbents, the big banks, to upgrade, improve access to their systems, to allow technology companies to innovate for the benefit of the end user, whether that's a business or a consumer. And I think what we'd say is that is providing more and more choice for small businesses, who is ultimately our end user, And they have more choice than ever now. They've got non-traditional banks, or digital options, and that's almost providing the competition that the big banks have needed to innovate their products further. And I think the banks that embrace that and partner with companies who help them develop their technology will come out best. I think the other element on regulation, one. Personally, a personal opinion is it's really interesting to see what's happening. You can't, again, go a day without reading a story about buy now, pay later.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not going to pick on any individual provider here because I don't think that would be fair, but I think we are very quickly heading towards a stage where, and I think they're prepared for it, which is good, but I think we are very quickly heading to a stage where that will need to become there will need to be some sort of regulation implemented there for the benefit and the protection of the end user.
No, absolutely. That's a really good point. Niels, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have a bit of a confession to make. I used to be a regulator some years ago. I was at the FSA, which then became the PRA at the Bank of England. And so maybe I can offer a perspective from the inside.
From the other side, yeah.
I think, Cam, you mentioned that regulators want, to avoid harm to customers or detriment. Essentially, what happens in regulation is it's very reactive. So what we have now is a reaction to the financial crisis.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, yes, rules change. You get GDPR, you get open banking, etc., etc. But what regulators want doesn't really change. So, there was once upon a time they called, they were talking about treating customers fairly.
Yeah.
It's basically the same as avoiding harm to customers, give or take. And what I can say is that what regulators really want is an earnest effort on, let's talk about fintechs, on the part of fintechs or industry to do right by their customers and to avoid spectacular blow-ups. And in a UK context, if you as a business are, you're doing that in good faith.
Yeah.
UK regulators are quite lenient.
Okay.
And quite forgiving.
Yeah. It's when it gets a bit malicious that people start worrying.
That said, we have new rules coming out all the time. That's a fact of life. And so what I say to my students is that, there's a great opportunity because there's almost a regulatory business model in the sense that they're happy to recruit graduates and have them train them up and have them work there for 2 or 3 years and then let them out into industry as a way of disseminating best practice.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's what they tell you after they offer you the job.
And I guess that's really interesting as well in that, a few of you alluded when we were talking about kind of careers and skills gaps to regulatory experience being something that was hiding at a senior level. So it's interesting to hear about it kind of coming up the ranks as well.
Yeah, it's a very good career opportunity for young people.
Absolutely. Now, I've got 2 more questions before I'm going to throw it out to you guys. So have a think if you've got anything burning in the back of your brain. But until then, so Nick, you mentioned before about the buy now, pay later, which you're seeing everywhere, and potential upcoming financial crisis. So obviously these are incidents that are being responded to as a result of the past 18 months and the world going mad. What changes and developments have you guys seen within the sector? Because obviously we've moved so much, the acceleration towards e-commerce has just been rapid. I can't remember the last time I had any cash in my purse, which is really exciting. And in terms of the way that consumer experience is changing, what have you seen across the sector? Cam, I'm going to go to you because you're enabling quite a lot of this, which is brilliant.
Yeah, so we saw pretty much overnight brick and mortar retail dying, and literally because they couldn't open their shops, And so businesses who hadn't previously prioritized their online offering were scrambling to find a way of servicing their existing customers. And we played, I guess, a pivotal part in that, first of all, because we're at the core of the transaction side of e-commerce. So we were advising a lot of businesses on how to optimize that checkout, how to actually take payments, and even for some legacy players, revisiting their whole e-commerce proposition. I guess that's one part. The second part is actually the understanding, because a lot of older players just neglected that whole side of business. You know, brick and mortar is going to be here forever. It's a cash society, etc., etc. What we saw in the pandemic was sort of a 2 or 3 year shift straight away, and so we were educating a lot of people on how it works. So that's probably what I saw as the biggest shift.
Just going to ask you a quick question on that as well. You guys have obviously been solving a lot of problems and a lot of legacy issues. What are the common ones that you kept seeing, and what solutions did you bring to it as well?
I think common ones are just understanding. So, you know, e-commerce needs investment, and that's from the website user experience, even back-end logistics, how it all fits together. And for us, we were predominantly focused on the transaction part. So, you know, businesses who have monthly subscriptions, as an example, we're educating them on how to take recurring payments. Also on PCI compliance, you know, businesses who never transacted online before are now falling under that regulatory piece. So that's where we really fit in.
Well, I just as we went into the pandemic, a couple of weeks afterwards, I hosted a podcast, and on it I had one of the senior execs from MasterCard. I think it was about 8 weeks in, and he actually said they'd just received and put out an announcement that in the first 8 weeks of the pandemic, they'd seen a 5-year acceleration shift in e-com in that period, because literally we all had to do it. So, you know, we can say we would never have wanted the pandemic, but on the other hand, you know, there has been this shift to the digitization of life. I think what we have to be you know, talking about trends here. But I also want to be guarded again and be that bar humbug to say that we shouldn't leave behind those people. You know, we're digital, you know, there's a lot of digital natives in the room. We're people that, you know, have been using technology for most of our lives. Me less so, but, you know, I wasn't brought up on the internet, but, you know, been using it since my early 20s. But there is a lot of people out there that, you know, still are not you know, digital in the way that they operate, and we have a responsibility as a nation to make sure that these people are still included, and that there is still cash, and there are checks, and there are these things. And going on to your point about buy now, pay later, I agree with you that, you know, people can overuse that. But one of the things that the pandemic, you know, has created is created some economic strife. With, you know, we're just coming out of having furlough. We're going to see more and more people unemployed, and we need to make sure we have sustainable ways in which people can borrow, because people are going to need to borrow just simply not to buy like a new handbag or a nice new sofa or whatever, but people are going to need to borrow just to get by. So, you know, again, as an industry, a trend I would like to see is more products out there where people can borrow responsibly, but also have affordable borrowing as well.
Thanks. Yeah, I completely agree with a lot of what all of you have said there. I think the way in which we look at the trends from the last 18 months, again, from two lenses. One is through the lens of a bank, who is obviously our primary audience, and then through small business. Cam used the term before, bricks and mortar. I think you don't get, you know, the traditional perception of a bank, you don't get much more bricks and mortar than that. Yeah. And I think some of them were horribly underprepared for the needs of businesses overnight to change the way in which they took payments. And that is a trend that plays across all of the workflows of businesses as well. So that's something that banks have, in terms of that acceleration that Angela mentioned there, they're rapidly recognising the need to not only protect their existing market share, but in the future, they're seeing it as a way to acquire new market share from a small business perspective as well. From a small business perspective, again, to use the term that Cam used, they have to change the way that they operated overnight, set up online, etc., and that comes with it a digital transformation from their perspective. I think the one trend that we've seen really exacerbated by the pandemic is late payment. This was a trend pre-pandemic, but as with anything with the pandemic, it's that acceleration, that exacerbation, etc. There's lots of good initiatives around this, prompt payment code, good business pays, etc. And I think both schemes acknowledge technology is the best way of solving that. And I think that's where we would wholeheartedly agree there as well. When I looked in a previous role, I was looking at the use of commercial cards as an increasing means of buyers paying suppliers in a B2B context. And I think in a B2B context, you have to remember that every buyer is a supplier and every supplier is a buyer.
Yeah.
Just one late payment in the chain has a knock-on effect to several other businesses downstream. And that's something that big businesses in particular should bear in mind if they are late on payment to smaller suppliers as well. Ultimately, it's to their detriment because that's working capital that smaller businesses can't reinvest in the activities that generate revenues for their business. So late payment is a big one that we would call out as having really got worse over the last 18 months as well.
Absolutely, and I've seen it across social media, especially from smaller businesses and freelancers, and I think there should be that responsibility from larger businesses to make sure that they are securing that cash flow. Niels, you look deep in thought there, so what are your thoughts?
Well, I was just thinking about what's been said, and I'd like to offer a challenge to the fintech sector.
Okay.
Because I think on a couple of levels, if you'd let me. On one hand, what Angela said regarding inclusion, this is very real. There are 9 million people in the UK who cannot access the internet without assistance. So that's a lot of people. And for all sorts of reasons. It's the cliche is, it's pensioners. No, that's not true. It's people of all ages, shapes and sizes and backgrounds. So I'd say there's an opportunity or a challenge. Well, can we, as an industry, or is there a business that can build a solution that actually caters to these people?
Yeah, so promote digital inclusion.
Yeah, or I don't know if it's possible. That's why I'm throwing out the challenge. The other part is this idea that we're moving, everything is becoming digital.
Okay.
And if we think of things on a more meta level, that trends don't always go on in perpetuity. There's this idea of mean reversion. Yeah. And so what I've seen from working from home where I live locally is the local shops have actually been reinvigorated. So my challenge to the fintech sector, well, if you are engaging with the world digitally, and by implication globally, how can you become locally relevant?
Yes,
because I think there is a kind of counter trend to digitization that people actually want to interact with people, and so with the underlying currents of automation making people redundant, the challenge to industry is, well, can we redeploy those people to provide more of a human touch, and where can they be, as part of the user experience? Where can we provide that human touch?
And that's a really interesting challenge, I'd imagine, within a fintech organisation to look at the HR team probably working with the customer journey team to map out that workflow.
Looking at skills.
Yeah.
But I would note that there is a very strong financial incentive to do this, because some of the research I've read is that basically if you have a proposition where your customers get to engage with real people, the rates of customer loyalty, so customer retention, are much, much higher.
Cam, you've been doing quite a lot of work around this, haven't you, in total processing? Because you do quite a lot with hospitality and retail as well.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a challenge. It's the age of problem. If you're a retailer and you have a store, then you've got additional costs that a pure play ecom business doesn't have, and so you're always at a disadvantage from a financial point. What we're seeing is these retailers probably shifting to more experiential type place, where you still use the online proposition more, but you visit the retailer in store for a different experience. I think Tesla are doing that pretty well. So instead of the traditional car garage where you've got hundreds of cars, you've got the 2 or 3 models in a showroom, and then you still place the order online. And I probably think that's where the shift will happen. And you mentioned mean reversion. I think the retail experience is going to be completely different to what it's been historically, but there will still be that inclusion and that human touch in person.
Right. Oh, go on, Nick.
Sorry, I was just wanting to pick, and I think both, again, really valid points, definitely. I think every day there's a new fintech story, and I think you have to sometimes cut through some of the ones that are a little bit gimmicky. Do I really care what colour my card in my wallet is? It's on my phone anyway. Do I really care what shape it is? And then I just look at some of the stories that get a little bit lost amidst all the noise. And to pick up on Niels's point around financial inclusion, and also that touch of digital and in-person experience, that you look at initiatives such as what TSB are doing around pop-ups for money confidence, if you like. So they're using redeploying resource, to use that term that you used earlier, to allow that face-to-face experience to educate and train people on becoming more digital savvy. So I think that's something that's been a little bit lost amid all the noise. And then again on conclusion, so HSBC retraining staff, they've just launched an account for homeless people, so they've had to retrain their staff on the onboarding and registration process for that. So again, a really interesting way in which digital and that in-person experience is being combined as well.
Yeah, I agree with the hybrid approach completely to the way we operate now, whether it's fintech or in any other way. Like you say, hospitality now, we order our coffee in advance and then online, and then go and pick it up at wherever we need to pick it up from. But what is so fantastic about this sector, fintech, is the fact that it's such a new, it's not a new sector. Banking technology has always been around, but we're so good at it in the UK, and it's a flourishing young sector that's become something absolutely huge. So there's an opportunity here for all of us in the room, or all of us that are involved in this sector, to be empowered, to be influential, to be connected, and to make a difference to a young sector while it's young. We can really grasp this and start to shape it. So my sort of take out to all of you is the way to do that is not just by running your own businesses or universities or buildings that we all need to work in. My advice is to get involved in things like this. Get involved in associations. I personally, in the last 5 years, have grown so much as an individual, and my skill sets, and also my outlook, by being involved in the Emerging Payments Association, Findexable, European Women in Payments Network, and also why I wanted the microphone back was I wanted to plug the the Inclusion Foundation, which is actually a foundation where we're looking at accrediting businesses who have good products that are financially inclusive. Neil Harris from who's the chairperson and who set this up, doing some fantastic work. And if any of you are interested in getting involved in any of these initiatives that I've mentioned, and there's plenty others if you want to Google them, that's how I really genuinely believe we're going to start to together grow the sector in Manchester, but also grow it everywhere else. And the opportunities are endless for all of us as well as a result of that.
That's That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Angela. And if I could ask you afterwards as well to signpost a few of those, and I can share them with the group, because I think it'd be really good to get more of us involved in that. So I'm just going to throw the questions out to the audience as to whether anybody's the discussion has sparked any ideas. Fantastic.
So it's Ilona at Elevate, and I've been delighted to be able to meet some of the panellists ahead of time. Really building on some of the stuff that particular Angela mentioned around the community, and the scale of fintech I don't think is as obvious when you just work around Manchester as something like advanced manufacturing or your health tech clusters, where you see those groups of businesses all in one place. Do you think there's a need for a physical space to bring those fintechs closer together to encourage collaboration, or is that something that could be done perhaps by some of the organisations that you've mentioned to actually have those, now we can, be back physically in a room together and develop more relationships across the sector?
Thank you. Great question.
So I would probably say that it's very close-knit, the fintech community, but it's probably not immediately obvious to the people who aren't in it. So I think we all kind of know each other one way or another. It's just how do we formalize it? I think probably something that's more formalized it would probably be beneficial. But I still think that the communication happens, just probably in secret. I think on physical location it's hard because it's so dispersed now and people are all working remotely. But for me, you always get more collaboration when you're in person, and so I definitely think we need to do more of that like we are today.
Yeah, and that's a thank you to you guys, Elevate and also Bruntwood for bringing this together. It's really important to do that. But I also believe that there was an attitude from some of the national associations, the important associations, that, London was the thing, and that I think that there is a shift in mindset. I can just, we did have an event a couple of years ago at the Emerging Payments Association. We had it up in Manchester. It was one of, they do have events outside of London, but most of them tend to be in London. And we had, great numbers. We only had 4 weeks, worth of run up to it. And I think it was about 150 people turned up from the northern regions, all saying we wish we had more things going on, in the north for fintech. And the EPA has just done a survey of its members, and one of the things that came out of this survey is they wanted more regional events. So I think that these national organisations will starting to wake up to the fact that amazing things going on outside of London. But I also think that we need to organise ourselves as well. And I know that that's happening with Pro Manchester and other groups where we are seeing these clusters start to take place. But I've been to a few of the events now, and I want to see more new faces. And I think that we've got to get back to that post-COVID world where that can happen. And starting, isn't it?
I think completely agree. I think initiatives like this are fantastic. A lot of the initiatives that you mentioned, Angela. I think one thing the tech sector in general has got going for itself is it doesn't come with any of that legacy attitude of sharing opinions and sharing, information. Essentially, it's not cagey as it might have been years and years ago, and that ultimately is for the good and of development and innovation, etc. I mean, we've since we've come out of the pandemic at Bankify, we've got a shared office space now. There's a lot of collaboration there within different companies, etc. So yeah, completely agree. And the world in which we live in, it's the tech is there. It's all built on open APIs, etc. So nobody's got anything to hide, I don't think. So yeah, it's a really collaborative sector.
Well, I agree with everything that's been said. I don't think I can add much.
As a really nice close for the day, one thing I would like to ask all of you is, looking forwards, let's think about trends in fintech. I mentioned at the start which horses we should be backing, which problems might still need some solutions. What is it that you guys are all particularly excited about at the moment? And Cam, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll go around.
from a purely payments perspective, which is our space, it's the rise of new alternative payment methods. So, the buy now, pay later has taken off over the last few years. Cryptocurrency potentially come in, open banking, and it's backing the white horse, and there's definitely going to be some winners in the sector. I'm just quite excited to see which ones those are.
Decentralized regulated currency. So I think when we start to see regulation in crypto is when crypto is just going to really, really sort of kick off.
Amazing, thank you.
I think in terms of the way in which if I come on to the specific trend in a second, I think technology will advance, and yes, fintechs will play a role there. I still think consumers and businesses will want to do that with their preferred, trusted financial institution. I don't think banks are going away. I just think the way in which they work will be much more open and collaborative. And if I use a consumer analogy, when I go to the supermarket with my daughter on a Saturday, she's 3, on a Saturday morning, I look at the way in which my what I take with me has changed. The wallet has gone. So then it was just the phone and the face mask, of course. And then the phone has eventually gone from a payment perspective. It's now on the watch, etc.
Yeah.
But underlying that, there is still a financial institution there that, there's a card in the background, essentially, if I use the supermarket analogy. I think there's so many parallels across the industry. So, yeah, that's what I think from mine.
Amazing. Niels, future trends that you're excited about?
Well, I think one of the big trends is with digitization, we inherently get decentralization. So things like blockchain. And I think for fintech as an industry, I think the challenge will be, well, how can we tether all these things to each other?
Yeah.
To get rid of the switching costs. So I think that there's a real opportunity behind the scenes there.
So a lot of what we've spoken about today, I think it all comes back to collaboration, whether that's between finance and tech to create the ultimate experience in fintech, whether that's between each other or whether that's the wider business community as well, which is always a really lovely thing to talk about, especially when we're able to start bringing people back together again as well. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to everybody at home as well, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. If you enjoyed today, as I mentioned before, please do check out bruntwood.co.uk/spark, because we've got tons coming up, loads of networking, loads of thought leadership stuff. It's set to be really exciting. So thank you as well to our wonderful panellists. I feel like I've learned so much. I really, really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your thoughts and opinions and things. It's genuinely been fascinating. So thank you very much.